Hello YouTube, Jerry Kirkpatrick here, and today we're going to finish up on the bullseye pick. And one of the most important things about using the pick is to make sure that it hits in the same place every time. So at the end of the video, when I get some dies set up in here, I'm going to show you how to take all of the slop out of this bottom jaw. The top one is pretty rigid because it's bolted to the main frame, but we have to tighten up the rivets and the joints where it allows the bottom one to move, so you're not hitting in the same place every time. So before we start, I'd like to give you a little background on how I came about using some of the parts that I used in making the original, this one here. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with the barn door theory. If not, here's a short version. There was a fellow that wanted to make a barn on his property. He wasn't a carpenter, he didn't know how to go about building a barn, so he went to a salvage yard and bought two big barn doors, set them up on his property, and then started building the barn around the doors. And as you know, that's 180 degrees from the way you should approach building a structure of any kind. Well, that's pretty much how a lot of the material that I used in this piece came about. For example, this piece here that gets welded on, that I can bolt the upper arm to, well, I just happened to have some pieces in my scrap bin that were the right length and already had the holes in them, so that was a no-brainer there. The two nuts that I elected to use were these here. In 1963 and 1964, when the 289 Cobras came in, when I was building them, we got the chassis and a lot of other parts and a Girling clutch slave cylinder. And what they sent over was a little bitty nut like that, you know, with a cone machined on it for actuating the throwout bearing fork. Well, that was too small for the Ford clutch fork, so I wound up with a whole bunch of these things. They were machined at Shelby's by Malin Lamoureux, was the machinist. And every now and then I'd go get a handful, take them back to my station, and when I started assembling a Cobra, I'd have to take this nut off of the Girling slave cylinder and put one of these nuts on. So that's how I wound up with these two on my particular bullseye pick here, the first one that I made. The reason that I chose 1/2 for the nut size that would accept any 1/2" 20 bolt that I wanted to modify was because of this hammer here. Probably in 1972, 73, something like that, I found this thing in a garage sale. And one of the reasons I liked it was because This pick is removable, and it is 1/2-20. So during the subsequent years, I've made all sorts of different hammer heads that will fit this. So I had all of those hammer heads already made, so I figured why not make my bullseye pick use hammer heads that I already had made. Made sense to me. Then I started using my air hammer. Actually, it's a rivet gun. Hits much harder. It's a 1X. And I made a bunch of these nylon inserts, I guess you'd call them, that would screw on to the ends of 3 hammer bits that I made to fit into the rivet gun. So with that, I decided to make this adapter with a 1/2-20 that will fit into my bullseye pick, and then a 5/16 18 stud coming out here, so I can use any of these hammer heads that I've made for my air chisel. They will also fit my bullseye pick. So that may have been long and convoluted, but what I'm trying to get across is I can mix and match 3 different tools in any combination that I want. So I didn't make my original tool just with a pick welded onto the end and a anvil on the other side. The way I designed this and built it, it has a very broad spectrum of different inserts that I can put into it. So that is why this bullseye pick is made the way it is. So now let's get over to the anvil, and I'll show you how to tighten these joints up to make this bottom jaw come up and strike exactly where you want. And I know the majority of you will not have an anvil, but you have a vise. You can set up a piece of bar stock in your vise, use that as an anvil, and you'll be able to do exactly what I'm doing, but in a different way. So the 2 things that you're going to need is a bolt or anything that will fit into the top arm of your bullseye pick with a bullseye. I just turn this in the lathe so I know exactly where the center of this particular bolt is. And that one's going to go in here like this. And then I've taken a second bolt and just roughly turned on the grinder, turned a taper on it, and it has a very pretty sharp nose on it, probably a 1/8 inch radius at the most. Because that's what you're going to be using to peck your low spots up. And that one is going to go into the bottom. And when those 2 are in place, I'll adjust them so they're almost touching, and then I'll move this around and then use that to adjust how I tighten up this upper portion, and that will bring the center of this into the center of the bolt. So let me show you how to mark this out, and then we'll get over on the anvil and we'll tighten it up. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is confirm that you have maintained that 3/8 to 5/8 inch between the body and the head of that nut. If you don't have that spacing in there, do whatever it takes to get you where these are parallel. You have enough spacing in here so you can either open or close the jaws to be able to align the dies when you get them in there. So before you start tightening up this joint, you want to make sure that you've got the spacing, these are parallel, and then you look right here and you can make a mark. Because that's as far forward as this bottom joint, bottom jaw goes. You can see how it retracts as you open it up. So I'm going to make another mark on the other side. That way I can work on either side of the pliers. I'm going to put another mark right here where it's fully opened. So I know that this is the area that I'm going to want to work to bring these in to remove that slop. You can see there how that moves in between these two sides of the clamp itself. So now that I've got it marked on both sides, let's get over to the anvil and I'll show you how to tighten this rivet up, this rivet up. There is movement back in there, and that's going to accentuate the amount of movement that you're getting out here. So we want to tighten up this joint, and this joint. So I have now installed the top and bottom dies. This one has the bullseye, you can see it there, and you can see here how sloppy that is. We've got to take that out so this strikes right in that area every time. And I have this set so even though the handles are fully shut, that's still free to move. So the first thing I'm going to do is tighten this joint up, and all I have to do is place the rivet on the edge of the anvil and strike it. And I can look right in here, see how close those are. It needs another hit. Now that's getting pretty close. It still moves freely. The next one is this joint here, this rivet. You can see a lot of movement in that area there. So I'm going to place this rivet right on the edge of the anvil. And bring that in. and that tightened it up quite a bit. Now for the most important one is we have this off. If we push this all the way to that side, that is almost in the center. If we push it off to this side, it comes way off to the side. So what we're going to want to do is leave this side alone and bring this side in. So to do that, I'm going to open that up, lay this whole area, get as much area as I can on the face of the anvil, and I'm going to strike right between these two lines. And I'm going to use the cross peen to do so. You may not be able to see it, but I brought that in quite a bit. Yes, you can see right there, there's almost no space in there whatsoever. And this side I left alone, and you can see that I'm right down the center. And that is just a little bit too tight. So I'm going to leave those closed, put that right there, and strike the jaw right there. And that opened it up. Now it's free to move. If I tighten that up just a little bit so it strikes, yeah, this is how you're going to work this tool from now on. Right like that. You put the piece that you're wanting to work on right in this area. You know that the center of this is right over the dent that you want to take out, and you can just pick it right out. So that concludes making a bullseye pick, and I hope if you make one of these you'll get many years of good use out of it. And as you're making it, kind of do as I did. Don't make it for a single use, single purpose tool. Try to think of other ways that you can either use other tools that you have so you can combine them, so you only have to make a top or bottom die for one tool. Like I say, with mine, I can use 3 different tools and use the same dies. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you to my new patrons and to everybody that bought me coffee. See you later.